So now that it's 5 minutes past 12, let's begin. So I did introduce myself very briefly. My name is Alex Reed. I am the Technical Sales and Customer Success Manager here at Homely. It is my great pleasure to have Dr. Karolis Petruskevicius. That is going to be the hardest thing that I say all day today with us. He is the head of technology and a leading expert in the renewable energy sector with a specific focus on home technology and heat pumps. He is the original product founder and currently our head of technology at Homely. And we're at the forefront of developing a smart controller that optimizes the performance of heat pumps and creating energy efficient homes. So thank you very much, Karolis, for joining us today. Before we kick off, I do want to bring to your attention, and hopefully you've seen it on our LinkedIn and on our website as well. We have done extensive testing with the Energy House Labs facility at Salford University. Now, after extensive testing, their studies also support that Homely can reduce heating bills by £440 by factoring in things such as heat pump performance, weather forecasts and solar gains, as well as electricity prices. Now, the article will be available on our website and it is about a 4 or 5 minute read, but Karolis will be going into a lot more detail in this webinar in how those results occurred and how we got to where we are. Now, moving on, there are 6 things that I do want you to take away from this webinar. And the key takeaways for you to remember is, as an installer, Homely is going to make sure that there is no manual weather compensation that you need to worry about. It's also going to give you better installer insights as well. And because you've got better insights, you will also have less callbacks. On the flip side, with regards to the customer, there is a saving of up to 22% increase in efficiency. And just so you have an idea of what that's comparing to, that's a fixed tariff at 55-degree flow rate versus a fixed tariff with Homely. There is also up to 31% reduction in heating bills as well. And just by way of comparison, that is a fixed tariff versus a time of use tariff with Homely, specifically with Octopus Cozy. Now, the other benefit with that is the improved comfort as well. So the installer equation that we've come up with is that Homely is going to provide easier installs for you. You're going to have happier customers. And by way of that, it's going to mean more business for you. So overall, Homely is a solution to make your life easier and give you less of a headache, allowing you to earn more business. And it further improves the heating business case through uber efficient running costs. So with that, I will now hand over to the very capable Karolis.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining. That last name of mine, we've done 2 of these already, and every single time it comes out different. All right, so to explain out what Homely is and what it is, it's usually easier to compare it against the alternatives in the market. So as Alex said, we are expecting a technical audience here on the call today. And I thought it would be helpful to illustrate how other thermostats are connected into the heat pump and how we compare to those thermostats. As standard, essentially standard heat pump installation, when installing a heat pump, one usually sets a weather compensation. We're all familiar with this. This is usually a bit of a guesswork, as it's nearly impossible to know the true weather compensation at the point of installation. So we do the heat loss calculations. We know what the flow temperatures should be, but there are so many different other factors that are influencing this that the first time setup of the weather compensation is not going to be perfect. When this is set up, it is usually being set slightly higher. So if you're doing the heat loss calculations according to the MCS guidelines, there is a little bit of meat in there, essentially to make sure that the houses don't get too cold, which means that the heat loss that you will calculate and the flow temperatures that you're expecting to deliver into that property on paper are going to be slightly higher. So the weather compensation that is going to be set up at the point of installation will be slightly higher than what it could be. Therefore, once the installer leaves site, there might be some tweaking that is necessary by the end customer if you decide to just run the heat pump on the weather compensation. Sometimes to avoid this tweaking and to avoid explaining what the weather compensation is to the end customer, it's a lot easier to put an on and off thermostat onto the heat pump So this is the thermostat that any thermostat that you would wire into the heat pump into the external thermostat connections, where there's only one signal that can be sent from this thermostat. So this is the on and off, essentially. The weather compensation that was set up initially will still be operating in the background. There is still a weather compensation that runs there, but you're now allowing the end customer to control their heating schedules and everything through the third-party thermostat. What this means is that essentially, because that weather compensation is probably going to be set slightly higher, this external thermostat will work. But all in all, this customer, even though gets the comfort that they want with an easy to use, external thermostat set point interface, they won't be able to achieve the kind of efficiencies that they could do if that weather compensation was set correctly. So this is where Homely comes in. And instead of connecting into the on and off terminals of the heat pump, Homely connects the heat pump through what's called Modbus terminals. It's still the same easy installation of the 2 wires into the heat pump, but with an added bonus that no weather compensation on the heat pump needs to be set at the point of installation. Homely will learn that tailored weather compensation for each individual property as it's installed. In terms of Modbus, don't worry about looking into too much into the protocol. Essentially, it doesn't really so much matter what Modbus is. All that matters is that this way of communication, those 2 terminals that are available on the heat pump, allow Homely to communicate with the heat pump in a 2-way fashion. So we can not only send the on and off signals, but we can constantly be changing the flow temperature set points. We can check the hot water temperatures. We can read a lot of information from the unit. For those of you who are familiar with an open therm protocol that used to be on the boilers, this is similar to that. It essentially allows us to, rather than send just on off to the heat pump, it allows us to talk to the heat pump and ask it for different sort of information and also control it in a much better way. There's 2-way communications. By monitoring all of this information from the heat pump, such as the heat delivered into the property, the flow temperatures, and combining it with the information of what we're receiving on the Homely side. So this is the outside temperatures, the solar forecast, the internal temperature readings of the property. We can use all of this data to build this digital image of the property. Essentially, after Homely has been in the property for a couple of weeks during the heating season, it knows what flow temperatures need to be sent to the heat pumps to deliver the comfort of the customer. And in turn, that's your weather compensation learned based on data rather than the initial calculations that could be done at the point of heat loss calcs. As I said, as we tailor this weather compensation to all individual properties, it means that the heat pump can be running at its most efficient flow temperatures, delivering efficiency improvements. And what we've seen from the Energy House testing, this can lead to up to 22% efficiency gains on these installs. So it saves times on installations, monitors the heat pump and indoor temperature for optimal settings to learn that property, to understand, to build this digital picture of the property. And then in turn, it improves the efficiency of the heat pump. So enough about the 2-way comms. Let's talk about what is actually happening behind the scenes and what this tailored weather compensation looks like. So let's take a simple example of a heat pump with a weather compensation. And on a setup with a weather compensation, the heat pump would be monitoring the outside temperature, as we know. So through the internal temperature sensor on the heat pump, it would see what the outside temperature is. Essentially, that would be translated into some sort of flow temperature that is based on the weather compensation curve that you provided at the point of installation. So on the graph here, you can see at the bottom where the black line is, that is representing the outside temperature throughout the day. And we'll use this to just illustrate what Homely would be doing in some of these situations. You can also see at the very bottom, there are small sunshine symbols. So that's also to show the sunshine throughout the day, because that's something that Homely considers as well. So as we've mentioned, the standard weather compensation is basically an inverse of the outside temperature based on the weather compensation that you've provided at the point of installation. So for each outside temperature, the weather compensation that you provide at the point of install will translate to some sort of low temperature set point. This blue line is essentially what we would see as the standard weather compensation. And in most cases, if we said, the external thermostat would be installed to manage those indoor temperatures and to provide the customer with set point management. Now with the Homely example, we've already said that Homely will learn the weather compensation and tailor it to the property based on all of that data that it collects after it's installed. So what we normally find is that this learned weather compensation is quite a bit lower than what would have been set at the point of install. If you were to just do the heat loss calcs based on the MCS guidelines, this is something that we've observed in the energy house testing as well. This means that even without any external factors affecting the indoor temperature, Homely would already be sending lower flow temperatures to this property, keeping the heat pump running more continuously throughout the day, delivering heat into the property in that low and slow fashion, rather than turning the heat pump on and off. We can see Homely's dynamic weather compensation. So this is what we call that flow temperature set points that are being sent to the house. Homely dynamic weather compensation, and that on the graph is presented by the orange line, with an area in between the blue line and the orange line, the green area. That's your energy savings that Homely could deliver. So to start with the very beginning of the day, at midnight, you can see that the orange line is already lower than the standard weather compensation line. This is again what we usually see is that those flow temperature set points that we could be sending to the property are a bit lower than what we would have assumed if we were to just do the heat loss calcs at the point of installation. So that's why the orange line is already offset. Now, if we look at 6 a.m., there are other features of Homely that can improve the comfort of the customers and improve those that efficiency of the heat pump and increase energy savings. So the first event of the day is the shower breakfast. This usually means that we cook some breakfast, have a shower, all delivering heat into the property, meaning that the heat pump doesn't need to be running as hard during these times. Homely will see these internal temperature changes, and it will see that something is actually adding heat into the house that is unexpected. Therefore, would adjust the flow temperatures even lower. So you can see that orange little dip at 6 a.m. That's Homely reacting to the internal temperature changes and this additional heat that is coming from the other sources to basically not waste that heat and not deliver it through the heat pump because it doesn't need to, maintaining the customer at comfort levels and reducing wastage. The second event of the day is the midday event, where at 12 o'clock, as you can see on the graph, we see that the sunshine is at its most intense. Homely takes into account things like solar gains that are going to be coming through your windows. So this is not the PV that would be generating power on with your solar panels and then the energy is used by your heat pump. This is simple as the sun starts hitting your windows, you'll get the property is going to start to heat up. And Homely takes this into account as well. It also uses predictions of this for the day ahead. So we're downloading from our weather forecast provider, we're downloading data on cloud cover, on solar radiance, and all of this is essentially, again, going into that digital picture of the property of when the sun starts hitting your windows, how will it be affecting the internal temperature? Homely takes this into account and once again starts to lower the flow temperatures because this heat is coming through your windows. The solar gains don't need to be then compensated for by the heat pump. So again, that gap between the blue line and the orange line increases. And the last event of the day is dinner, TV. As we cook our dinner, use the oven, move around the property, turn on TV. All of these things are producing heat. And once again, heat pump doesn't need to be producing the heat at similar fashion when these events weren't there. So this is once again, Homely lowers the flow temperatures to reduce the amount of heat that we're putting into the house using the heat pump, while still maintaining comfort of the house, in turn avoiding waste of energy. To illustrate what would actually be happening, if you were to stand there next to the controller of the heat pump throughout the day, you would see how Homely is changing the set flow temperature set point on the heat pump, and this would be dynamic weather compensation in action, essentially. This would be happening when considering outside temperatures, current indoor temperatures, predictions of the outside temperatures, and customer set points. So every day is going to be different because those conditions will be changing. And you could see how Homely is kind of reacting to these changes by just looking at that controller. I appreciate that I've covered a lot of complex stuff before, but that was all just to kind of share with you what Homely does in the background, so that you understand the product a little bit better and why it can deliver what it can. Essentially, the point of Homely is to hide all of this complexity away, so you don't need to explain all these things to the end customer. And what your end customer will just need to know is Homely is there to take all the complexity away of the heat pump. So let Homely do the thinking. As part of Homely, your customers will receive a Homely app that they'll use to control their heating. And this app has been made with simplicity at the forefront of the thinking. So all your customers need to do is just tell the app, in terms of their heating schedules, what is the minimum comfort level that they're comfortable with. So if they'd like at least 20 degrees throughout the day, at least 21 degrees in the evening, that's what they need to tell Homely app. And then Homely will do all the thinking behind the scenes and heat the house in the most efficient way possible. So just to be clear, if you had a setback temperature as an example, so morning set point and evening set point of 21 degrees and a setback temperature of 20 degrees throughout the day, Homely sees this as the minimum comfort levels. And it doesn't, what Homely wouldn't do is, just as the morning set point finishes, it wouldn't turn off the heat pump and wait till the temperature drops to 20 degrees. It would know that there is a set point later in the day, in the evening, of the 21 degrees, and it will then figure out what is the best thing to do here. So does it make sense to cool this property down and to then heat it back up to 21 degrees? So let's say it's a leaky property and it's cold outside. That might be the best thing to do. Essentially drop your internal temperature to 20 degrees and then bring it back up to 21 degrees. Or in other scenarios, does it make sense to run it low and slow? So essentially all the way throughout the day, it could be that Homely decides to just keep that house at a comfortable 21 degree temperature, so that it's then that heating up the house throughout the day with the highest efficiencies possible. Homely will do the calculation behind the scenes to figure out what is the most efficient way to do it. So that was the Homely product for the fixed tariff customers, essentially the perfect weather compensation. And still, majority of the customers out there will have just that single rate tariff throughout the day. But Homely is there to provide a lot more than that. So not only can it improve the heat pump efficiency on a fixed tariff, but it can actually be utilized with the time of use tariffs that keep on cropping up. So these are the heat pump tariffs, even to the extent of agile tariffs, where the electricity prices are different every day. Homely is currently compatible with all time of use tariffs available on the market. And what is very important to take away is Homely doesn't just try to go blast the heat pump during the cheap times of the day. It does the trade-offs between the efficiency, because we all know that if we're going to run the heat pump at higher flow temperatures during those cheap times of the day, we will be sacrificing some of that efficiency of the heat pump. There might be a price difference between certain pockets of the day to the others. It might not make sense to be running that heat pump full out 55 degrees just to kind of put heat into the house. And Homely will do all that calculation for you again. So because we've learned about that property in terms of how long it takes for it to cool down and heat up, we'll know what it makes sense to do with flow temperature. So it might be that we overheat the property slightly during the cheap times, still using the flow temperatures that are not penalizing the efficiency too much, and jump through parts of those more expensive periods, but not all of them. We'll talk a little bit more about it when we discuss Salford Energy House results. With these cheaper tariffs, what Homely is essentially doing is using the customer's home as a battery. If we take an example where the customer would say that I would like my house to be 20 degrees throughout the day, but I am comfortable with that house going to 21 degrees. And that's what they can set up on their customer app. So they say that I want these minimum temperatures, and then I specify my maximum temperature that I'm comfortable with. Homely will use this, think of it as a road. So we're given this road, and we need to move along this road at the best cost efficiency possible. So he'll be able to overheat the house slightly during the cheap times and let it coast through the periods of higher prices. That's for the end customers. So fixed tariff optimization, time of use tariff optimization, that's all great for the end customers, but it's not it's not all about end customers at Homely. We believe that the heating engineers installing Homely are the driving force behind the mass heat pump adoption, as we understand that to deliver those ambitious goals of heat pump installations across the UK, the engineers need to be equipped with the right tools. Homely is here to help. So, as we've already spoken about it, Homely reads a lot of information from the heat pumps. Flow temperatures, return temperatures, field setting values, errors, as far as refrigerant temperatures on some heat pumps. And having this information remotely is powerful. It means that when there are issues with heat pumps out there in the field, you don't need to jump in the van and go there without knowing what the issue is. You can look at our monitoring platform, inspect the data, and go to the site prepared, avoiding those unnecessary, drives to the merchant to pick up the parts. Hopefully, you will know what the issue is before you get there, and you'll be able to bring the right parts with you. In some cases, and that's what we've seen quite a lot of, you might not even need to go to site, as you might be able to change heat pump parameters remotely, the ones that are causing these issues, or in certain circumstances, it could be that the customer is actually just not understanding how the heat pump is operating, and you can give them, by looking at this data, by looking at historical data, you can give them that confidence that all is okay, and that's just the way the heat pump runs. So yes, moving into the Energy House results. So we've spoken a lot about the Energy House results, and we backed up basically Homely savings using this data. And I'm sure many of you on the call are eager to understand more on where these results are coming from. So historically, when asked how much Homely saves, it was difficult to give a concrete answer to the question, as in the field, no 2 days are ever the same. So doing a like-for-like comparison of a house heating with a Homely and without a Homely was extremely difficult. This is where Salford University's Energy House facility can really help. What this facility is essentially a house inside a chamber where we can replicate the outdoor temperatures in between days. So we can keep the external conditions the same, meaning that we can finally compare apples for apples when judging how well Homely can perform and how can it save money for these customers. Essentially playing God with the outside temperatures and solar gains and everything controlled. So we've done testing for the last 3 months and put Homely through its paces. There have been a lot of questions on what we were actually comparing. When we've released these Energy House results, we've received some queries in terms of what is actually being compared. Is it a fair test? So that's what I'd like to dive deeper into today. All in all, the testing was extremely successful. We did see that in a fixed tariff scenario, we saw heating bill savings of up to 22% through efficiency improvements. With the time of use tariff scenario, we saw heating bill savings of up to 31% improvements. And in between these two tests, there was only one thing that changed. So the setup of the heat pumps remained the same. The only thing that we did was install a Homely on it. We feel like that's really important. And to start with, that system design that we were comparing against, we wanted to make sure that the system is designed correctly. And what we didn't want to have is TRVs, buffer, glycol, secondary pumps. Essentially, we wanted to see how much benefit can Homely system deliver on a system that is performing well already. And that's what we've done. When picking the base case, so one thing that was extremely difficult is trying to figure out what is that base case that we're comparing Homely against. To pick a base case that everyone is going to be happy with is nearly impossible. We will get questioned on why have you chosen this, why have you chosen that. That's why we had to use some guiding principles in terms of picking this base case. So we needed to, because this Energy House testing was done with an academic partner, we had to make sure that everything that we do stands up to the academic rigor. We also wanted to make sure that these results are useful, not just for us, but for the industry in itself. That's why we need to make sure that it also stands up to the industry rigor. So for the base case control setup scenarios, we had to go out there and we had to do a little bit of research of how are the systems being set up at the moment. We found 3 answers, one of which was quite surprising. Talking to our partners, talking to some of the installers that work with us, we were told that one way to set up a heat pump is as per the distributor manual. So essentially what the distributor tells you to do. That's what you put in as the weather compensation at the point of installation. That didn't quite stand up to the academic rigor requirement because each distributor tells you slightly different kind of setup rules. So we couldn't use a particular distributor just to say that this is the standard way to install it. So we had to use something slightly different. We were also told that some engineers do install heat pumps and set up the weather compensation based on the MCS calculations, so heat loss calculations. At the design temperature of outside, you would then basically put your heat loss calculation value. So in our case, we designed a system for 55 degrees flow temperature. This house we were using outside temperatures representative of Leeds, and design temperatures in Leeds were around -3 degrees. So according to the MCS heat pump guide, it would tell you that you need to set the flow temperature at 55 degrees and -3 degrees outside, and then that curve needs to go to outside temperature of 16 degrees with a flow temperature of 30. This was okay because this, from the industry's perspective, these are the calculations that we're doing already. So we might be putting that flow temperature as per those calculations. It also stands up to the academic rigor because there's written guidance in the MCS heat pump guide. So we use that as one of the base cases, essentially a weather compensation as per the heat loss calculations. The last surprising answer from our partners was that installers were setting up heat pumps with a fixed flow temperature, that is the design temperature of the heat pump, and in our case that was 55 degrees, and putting in an external thermostat on it. So it's not something that we thought happens a lot, but we felt like it was an important base case to compare against, just to show the kind of savings that could be made even by just going from the 55 degree fixed flow temperature to the weather compensation that is set as per the MCS guidelines. So essentially these were the two base cases that we were comparing against, and homely, there is no static weather compensation curve that can be considered on the homely side. It's always changing, always adapting to the internal temperatures, and that's what we've had. So homely scenario was that dynamic homely weather compensation curve. And these were the results that we had. So we've done quite a lot of testing. The whole testing had to be, we couldn't test the whole winter. Essentially, that's too many days in the energy house. What we had to do is we tested a shoulder season day. That was kind of a representative shoulder season day and the representative winter season day. From these results, we then had to scale them into an equivalent annualized result in terms of the savings. So from the table here, you can see that a few surprising takeaways. So one was that if you were to have a heat pump installed on a fixed tariff, and now you decided to go for one of these time of use tariffs, they're made for heat pumps. If you don't make changes to the way that you're controlling your heat pump, you might actually end up paying more for your heat than you did before. This is because if a majority of those periods when you're heating your house fall into the periods of peak price electricity or even during the day rate, that might actually turn out more expensive than what you could have done by just sticking to the fixed tariff and running your heat pump on a normal weather compensation. So this is what you can see on the right-hand side of this table, average home equivalent with a fixed flow temperature base case. If you were to be on a fixed tariff, you would have paid £893. If you were to just move to a time of use tariff without changing the behavior of the heat pump, you would actually be paying £140 more. We felt like that was a really important takeaway to stress. Now, coming to the homely results, in all scenarios, homely was outperforming both the weather compensation base case and the fixed flow temperature base case. On a fixed flow temperature base case, with a fixed tariff, homely was able to save, if you can see here, going from £893 per year to £657. So that's around 240 quid, thereabouts. If you were to choose to go for a time of use tariff as well with homely, the savings were increasing even further, all the way up to £300. Same story with weather compensation base case, so the results are slightly smaller. They're still very encouraging, giving you above £100 savings just by having a homely there installed. Coming back to those points, that it's easier to use from the end customer's perspective. It's easier to control your heat pump. You get more efficient heat pump install, and the engineers also get this data behind the scenes that they can use to provide a better service. Win-win for everyone. Just before I finish off on the Energy House results, the time of use tariff scenarios were really interesting, and this is where I've stressed before that it's really important for us to do the right thing if we are choosing to go for these time of use tariffs. So what we were testing in the Energy House was a cozy tariff, Octopus Energy Cozy Tariff, which is a heat pump tariff and has pockets of electricity. They're really cheap. So you can see these as off-peak. Price is 15.91p, day rate 26.5, and then peak rate 42 pence per kilowatt hour. What we can see Homely is doing here, an important point, is that Homely does run during the off-peak times a lot more than the other periods of the day. So energy consumption percentage during the off-peak periods is 60%. But the flow temperatures that we're sending to the heat pump, so the flow temperature set points that we're sending to the heat pump, were actually not that high. So in the scenario, we can see that we were sending only 43.8 degrees average flow temperature. And this is coming back to the point where Homely doesn't just full on blast your heat pump during these cheap times. It does the trade-off between what are these price differences between the off-peak and peak time and daytime. What's the efficiency of this particular heat pump if I'm going to raise those flow temperatures? So if I'm going to run that heat pump a lot hotter, does it mean that my efficiency of it will be diminished more than what I could have saved by just running it flat out normally on the day rate? Important to note that those flow temperatures are not too high during those off-peak times. We still choose to run the heat pump during the day rate and even the peak rate. But during these times, we're only running it at a very small flow temperatures. In this case, you can see that we were sending a flow temperature set point of 35 degrees just to maintain that heat into the house by doing a lot more of that heating during the off-peak times. So 60% in the winter testing day, we used 60% of the energy during the off-peak. On a spring day, we used 74% during the off-peak. That's it from me.
Thank you very much, Karolis. So yes, back over to myself. I do want to bring your attention that it's not just us and Salford Energy House Labs that are saying this. We do have industry specialists and partners who are also feeding back to us constantly on the likes of LinkedIn and just emails to us directly as well. So this that you see on your screen now is just a quick snapshot of comments and feedback that we're getting on the likes of LinkedIn. And we do have industry partners as well who are also saying this and providing this feedback. Speaking of partners, we are compatible with 10 different brands at the moment, being Samsung, Riello, Midea, Daikin, Grant, Clivet, EBAC, Airwell, Nordis, and LG. We are, however, always looking to expand our integration list. So if you work with another brand that's not yet listed here, then please do reach out and let us know, and we can look to add it to our integration roadmap. I will just highlight that the likes of Samsung and Daikin, they do require a Modbus adapter. So for Daikin, it's a DCAM Modbus interface. And for Samsung, it will require a MIMBI 19 Modbus interface. These are just the additional heat pump components that you would require for Homely. It's just so that the heat pump can communicate with Homely. These Modbus interfaces are available at any of various distributors up and down the country, of which we do work with 5 partners at this moment in time, being City Plumbing, Midsummer, Robust Energy, Freedom Heat Pumps, and Barilla. We do have these distributors up and down the country in the renewable space, and they are always currently holding stock of Homely. But if you do work with other distributors which aren't listed here, and you think they would be interested in stocking Homely, then please do feel free to reach out and contact me directly. We'll look to see if we can get them added to the list. Now, Karolis did go into a lot of detail about the technicals of Homely and how it works and how it's optimizing that flow rate. With the actual installation side of things, it is just 2 wires from a Cat5 cable from the Modbus to Homely, and it's literally wire A to wire A and wire B to wire B. The only other thing that you would need to do is add a 120 ohm resistor across terminals A and B of the Modbus controller. And you can find all of this information in the manuals, of which they are available on our website. So if you do go to the installer page on our website, you'll see the list of heat pumps such as Samsung, Daikin, Midea. If you click on them, it will instantly open up the manual to that heat pump, and you can then follow the installation guides. As mentioned, I would recommend to make sure that you do have all of the heat pump components, especially for Samsung and Daikin, and they can be sourced from various distributors up and down the country. That being said, we don't want to leave you high and dry. We do also have a YouTube channel with our installer processes. So this is showing you how to install Homely for the different heat pump brands and the controller configuration. Again, I'd recommend just to make sure that you do go onto the website to make sure that you've got all of the parts that you require and that you fully know how to do that installation process. As I say, we do have YouTube there to support you as well, just for a couple of minute videos as well. Going back to what I mentioned at the very beginning of the webinar is that there are 6 key takeaways I do want you to remember. So as Karolis went into a lot of details, there is no manual weather compensation that you need to worry about. Homely will sort all of that out for you. There is also better installer insights as well. And also, because you've got those better insights, you also have less callbacks. Now that's for the installer side. For the customer side, again, it is up to 22% increase in efficiency, and that's comparing that fixed tariff at 55-degree flow rate versus a fixed tariff and Homely. You could also get up to 31 reduction in heating bills as well. Again, that's the fixed tariff versus the time of use tariff with Homely, specifically Octopus Cozy is the comparison that we made. And then your customer gets overall improved comfort because Homely is sorting out and dynamically adjusting that flow rate. So Homely is the solution to make life easier for you, the installer, with less headache, and allowing your customer to be happier and not having to worry. So it allows you to earn more business for yourself. With regards to what the next steps are, I would encourage you to download and register the installer app. You can find that on the Google Play Store or on the Apple App Store. For the installer app, it is just the grey tile with the white house on it. And you can download that and register, and that way you're set up and ready to go. I then recommend to order a Homely with your next heat pump purchase, and then it's going to take you half an hour to install Homely into the actual heat pump installation itself. And then that's it for you. You don't need to worry about anything else. The only thing that would need to happen is from your customer side, where they would need to complete the handover, where they would go onto the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the customer app, which is different to the installer app. This one is orange and also allows the customer to manage their heating schedule and set up their times. And that's it. Homely then does everything else. Neither you as the installer or the customer would need to worry about anything else, because as I say, Homely is doing that dynamic adjusting. Just so you do have a quick overlook of what the installer app does look like, you can see here on the far left hand side is that you've got a list of Homely's hubs. You would just add a hub, enter in the heat pump serial number, and then you'd also just let the Homely system know where the temperature node is located. For me, it would be in the living room. That's where I spend most of my time, and that's where we would recommend for the temperature node to be located. At which point on the final screen, you would just put in the minimum flow temperature and the maximum flow temperature, and that's then Homely ready to go. With regards to Homely, that's where we are at the moment, but there is always more install in the future, and we do have things coming up. Karolis did mention it, but we are also releasing our installer service portal. So this is going to include a range of value add features for you as the installer, which includes things such as monitoring the heat pump performance. Does also allow you to have remote changes as well to those heat pumps. So going one step further of knowing what the heat pump is doing and anticipating if you need to go to site or not, we've gone one step further, being able to give you remote access. So you don't even need to go to site, and you can save yourself that trip to Mary's house, for example, to go and double check what's happening with that heat pump. We are brand agnostic as well, so we do integrate with those 10 brands that I mentioned earlier. They will all be in a central location of the portal, and you can just go through each of those brands, whether it's LG, Clivet, whoever it may be, and it means you're not having to dive off and sign into Samsung portal or dive off and sign into Clivet portal. It's all going to be in one central location for you. We do also provide automated alerts, so this will empower you and make you look even better as the installer, because you can get ahead of the curve of if Mary's about to give you a call because she's not sure what her heat pump's doing. You'll get an alert prior to that if something has happened, and you can then let Mary know that you've noticed this is happening and you already sorted it and you look fantastic. And then we do also provide the history and the logs as well. So if you are at Mary's house for whatever reason and you're thinking, what did I set the heat pump up to, trying to have a think, you can simply go into the installer service portal, see exactly what the logs are and what the history is, and you know exactly where you are. So we're empowering you in that regard as well. As of that is it from me and the very capable Karolis. I will thank you again for taking the time out of your day to attend our session. And if you do have any queries, please reach out to us at sales@homelyenergy.com. General information is team@homelyenergy.com. And for support and services is 0161 818 9005. Thank you very much and have a good day.